Back now with the panel. Hugh Hewitt, host on the Salem Radio Network. Maria Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino. NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker. And Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post and moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Before we get to the issue of guns, Kristen Welker, I think we heard interesting news there from Secretary McAleenan, where he admitted that in hindsight, the Mississippi raids, the timing was unfortunate. Contrast that to the President of the United States almost cheerleading him and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, it's a deterrent. How is that going to go over?
Well, I thought it was a striking discrepancy in tone. After you pressed him a number of times, he finally said the timing was unfortunate. And again, when I asked President Trump about this the other day, he said, yes, it's a deterrent. He really leaned into this strategy. The bottom line is there wasn't a plan for dealing with these kids. The Trump administration had promised there weren't going to be any more family separations. There clearly were, even though some of those families have been put back together. I think the focus does become on the companies. That's where the heat has to be now, because if you're accusing all of these migrants of breaking the law, you have to put the focus, as you so rightfully pointed out, on the companies that were hiring them.
Maria, obviously, I think his response on the timing issue had to do with the impact it's had on Hispanic America.
Right. Well, the El Paso shooting is something that we have to underscore was something that was resounding accumulation of what the president is basically saying the moment he went down the escalators. The shooter used these words of invasion, of individuals that were coming down, and infestation. The driver literally drove 10 hours to go to the safest city in the country that's 85% Latino to send a message. We now know that he said, yes, I went to El Paso because I wanted to cause maximum harm. And in the backdrop, as the president is landing in El Paso, you have one of the largest ICE raids in our nation's history. So it's really hard to get this idea that the president was really there in El Paso to console, while at the same time running these operations that separated families. And when you heard the secretary talk a little bit about, the acting secretary talk about how many, he knew exactly the precise number of criminals, but he couldn't tell you how many people were documented that they were caught up in the raid, how many people were American citizens. In fact, there's stories that a lot of the folks that were in the plant were actually El Paso natives. So it's just the whole, not just the optics, but also it's not just the optics, it's the policies that this president keeps perpetrating against the Latino community that makes it feel like, yes, he's literally targeting the community disproportionately.
Hugh, when I saw, when the raids happened, I thought, boy, this is the typical dysfunctional White House. A functional White House chief of staff would have known about this, going, this is not the week for this, whatever you do. But now the more we learn, this was, no, intentional, this is what you do. But clearly, Secretary McAleenan is uncomfortable with what it looks.
He did do a good job explaining the complexity that faces DHS, the FBI, and DOJ. I was at DOJ for a while. I used to be in law enforcement a long time ago. No one knows all of the various threads that are operating at one point. I think he even indicated he didn't know that this was going down. The president certainly didn't know that this was going to happen. And the optics are, in fact, not just unfortunate, but terrible. That said, I thought he did a very good job in pointing out that DHS has 4,000 people living in El Paso, that an attack on El Paso by a racist is an attack on every American, and DHS in El Paso is overwhelmingly Latino. I credit him with explaining as best he could in a short period of time that DHS, like the FBI and the DOJ, is staffed by wonderful professionals, all of whom are trying to do their job, and it's a complicated balancing job.
But the only difference I would say is that he is the one that is the head of that department of ICE. He is the boss. The fact for the boss that did not know that they were going to undertake the largest raid in American history, that is really hard to fathom.
Robert Costa, we know the president takes a special interest in ICE, and we know he has a relationship with the current acting director, too. So it does feel as if sometimes you wonder, is he micromanaging these operations? Maybe not the specifics, but the larger tactics.
Stephen Miller, inside of the White House, has always had a heavy hand in immigration policy. The White House is also paying attention to the political cost of these activities. Suburban voters, even in red states, are paying attention. Some of them are taken aback. I was on the ground in the Atlanta suburbs this week talking to voters in a place like Chamblee, Georgia, that has a vibrant Latino community, with white voters as well, taken aback by what's happening with ICE, with the mass shootings, as you look ahead to 2020, both parties are looking to those kinds of voters. Does this stormy confluence of all of these issues, whether it's the ICE raids or violence in America, does that prompt some voters to rethink President Trump?
Well, let's talk about the gun issue specifically. What I found fascinating this week is that what used to be a divide on the Democrats on geography, guys, is now, I think, Hugh Hewitt, let me show you this, a divide among Republicans. This is on the red flag laws, and it's pretty stark here. John Barrasso, Steve Daines of Wyoming and Montana. No due process component, knee-jerk reactions, more gun laws are not the solution. Rural states. Contrast that with Rick Scott and Pat Toomey of Florida and Pennsylvania, lots of suburban voters. Rick Scott, we must not allow people who threaten to harm themselves or others to have guns. And Pat Toomey, my focus on keeping guns out of the hands of people who should not have guns. It is the Republicans that are divided, mostly on geography.
And they are divided by governors versus senators. Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona introduced the stop order, severe threat order of protection, last year after Parkland, and he is pushing for it again. The NRA supports it. Governor Mike DeWine this week of Ohio stepped forward with a stop order, or they're also called URBO. There are lots of governors.
Large state governors.
Swing state governors.
That's right.
And they understand that. I think Robert just referenced suburban mothers. It's suburban dads and grandparents, and everybody in the country wants people who are obviously not right in the head not to have guns.
Okay. Bob Costa just said that the Trump reelection team is well aware of their suburban problem. What does the president think? Does he think combating the NRA is going to hurt his base, or does sitting with the NRA hurt suburban voters? What does he care about more?
I think he thinks he can convince his base. I think he cares about the NRA membership, not so much.
Why do we believe he'll do this again? He didn't do it the last two times.
So I pressed him on this. He made the argument that it's time. Look, Democrats control the House. He's aware of that. He sees that as a potential opportunity. I can tell you that inside Republican circles, they feel as though the NRA leadership has been weakened because of some of the controversies that they've been dealing with. And everyone brings up the issue of the suburbs, Chuck. So that is a real concern. And I think President Trump, remember, he doesn't fit into a neat box when it comes to a political party. I think he wants to see this get done. The skepticism, time, because a whole month is going to go by before Congress comes back, and that loses momentum.
McConnell made a pledge to vote on something. He doesn't make pledges to vote on anything very often. So something.
He's reading the tea leaves.
He is.
This is one of the few moments where the president can actually bring in and neutralize a lot of his critics if they were able to do something meaningful on guns. But this idea
We've said this before.
No. But this is I think fundamentally different, because you see the movement of white suburban women. This is an issue at top of mind. When they put a backpack on their kid and take him to school, they want the kid to come back home.
Briefly, the legislative reality, based on my conversations with top senators in both parties, is that red flag laws, because of those comments by Senator Barrasso and other Republicans, probably not going to move forward. Background checks, that's the only game in town. The question now is, will President Trump lend any political capital to Toomey Mansion? When you talk to people close to Senator Manchin and Toomey, they say that's the only thing that could move forward.
I'm going to get killed here very quickly. Is anybody at the White House appalled that the president retweeted conspiracy theories involving Jeffrey Epstein?
I reached out to just about everyone at the White House. No response. Bottom line, I don't think they have one, Chuck. Everyone agrees the investigation has to move forward.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.